Welcome to the Point of No Return podcast, a show at the intersection of technology and strategy. On this show, we interview industry leaders and experts to better understand how they think about strategy during this time of exponential progress.
Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of the Point of No Return podcast. I was super happy today to talk with Jeremy Kopek, founder and CEO of Noa Sleep. Jeremy, a bit of a disclaimer, he's a very good friend, and I always take the time when I meet with him to just pick his brain about all things Asia and e-commerce. He's really one of the smartest people I know when it comes to those two subjects. So it was a bit selfish in getting him onto the podcast and just chatting with him about his new startup called Noa Sleep. It's a specialty e-commerce company that he founded in Canada, currently operating in Singapore, Hong Kong, and Australia. A bit of background on Jeremy. He has a very impressive track record. Prior to founding Noa Sleep last year in 2016, he served on a board advisory for a private equity firm in Beijing. In 2015-2016, he acted as a strategic consultant for 4 Chinese retailers, leading their restructuring efforts. Also assisting in the launch of online stores such as Tmall and JD.com. Prior to that, he served as head of strategy, marketing, and product for Structube, one of Canada's leading home furnishing retailers. People in Quebec are probably very familiar with the brand. They've been around for, I think, 40 plus years. During this time, he learned how to speak Mandarin fluently. I think he traveled to China like every other month. He led the digital transformation of the organization, helped build the omni-channel expansion strategy, helped launch e-commerce, and the list goes on. He was responsible for developing relationships with like hundreds of manufacturers across China, Singapore, Hong Kong, India, Vietnam, and the US. So I always enjoy talking with Jeremy. Like I said, he's the smartest person that I know when it comes to China. On the show, we spoke about how he started Noa Sleep, why he decided to launch in China first and the massive opportunity of that market. We spoke a little bit about the scale of e-commerce in the Asian market, which is kind of like mind blown for me. How the cost per acquisition was really a key factor in the decision. Some advice he had for entrepreneurs looking to enter China, and some key retail trends that he's keeping his eye on. I really enjoyed the chat. I learned a lot, as I usually do, and I really hope that you enjoyed the conversation. Jeremy, thanks for being on the show today.
Thanks for having me.
I'm super excited. Obviously, I've known you for a while, and happy that we're able to finally connect and speak. I've been really impressed with having a friend that speaks Mandarin. I always find it's such a different world when you talk about Asia. And before we're getting into your business and diving into Noa Sleep, maybe talk us a little bit about the inception story of how, your journey of, working in retail to then launching and starting a company.
Yeah. Well, first, thanks so much for having me. And I hope this is useful and entertaining to your audience. But yeah, really excited to be here. So the story, very, from a high level is I worked in retail for a leading retailer in Canada for over 10 years, navigated, a bunch of roles within that company, from a buyer, developing products, to then moving into a marketing role, helping the transformation to digital in the early 2000s, and then as director of strategy. So that was really about expansion, about figuring out strategies to enter new markets and so on. And after that role, after about 12 years, I decided to go into consulting and did a lot of work in Asia, where I spent a number of years and learned Mandarin. And it was through that experience, working in Asia, working with clients there in retail and e-commerce, that I really became fascinated with the scale, the dynamic environment that is Asia, specifically with respect to consumers. And so seeing those insights, really being passionate about the industry, really made me come to appreciate what I really cared about, which was building, companies, building brands, building products, creating experiences for customers. And that was something that led me to choose to start a business in Asia. One that I felt compelled to do with respect to the product, the business model, and I was fortunate enough to meet a great partner. So that's a very high level kind of snapshot of of that.
So you had a retail expertise.
Yep.
You had helped launch e-commerce at your previous brand, so you saw the struggles of how it worked. So what led you to, I guess, two questions: why e-commerce only to start with Noa Sleep versus traditional retail?
That's a great question. So I think empirically, if you look at McKinsey reports, for example, you'll see that omnichannel retailers far outperform pure play e-com, right? So in my previous experience, I worked for a traditional retailer that had, dozens of stores when I first joined to 50 when I left. And the idea was quite simple, which was really to pursue the digital transformation by launching an e-commerce at the time, right? And then continuing a physical expansion. For Noa Sleep, my current company, the challenge really was that we're a bootstrap company. And so while physical brick and mortar is essential to a brand and to any business that's trying to deal with consumers, I think we are limited to choose, what distribution channels, which operating channels we want to be in. And e-commerce made the most sense. Asia specifically is really interesting. And the reason is the growth rates in Southeast Asia, and actually in the whole APAC region, so Asia Pacific region, growth rates are high double digits in the high 20s, even 30s. So for example, Indonesia, has, over 150 million people, if not more. And the internet, mobile, and e-commerce adoption per month is unlike anything we've ever seen in the West. The only exception would actually be China, which, as you know, I've worked there, and that would be the only exception with that really trumps Southeast Asia. So in China specifically, what you see is a massive shift online, where as a percentage of retail, e-commerce is huge. And so that's really the trend, one of the trends that I wanted to ride, which was this adoption of e-commerce.
So you start with e-commerce and then focus really on Asia. Did you ever consider North America, or just because of your expertise in Asia, you said, I'm just going to skip a mature market and join a market that's much more in hyper growth mode? Was that the core reasoning, or was there anything else?
That's a great question. And everyone that asks us, so why are you opening in Asia? Why are you doing this in Asia? And the reason is there's really three buckets. So the first is, we were looking for greenfield space. So markets that were developed, mature, have strong e-commerce, internet, and mobile adoption, but where the competitive landscape was not either oversaturated or far too competitive. And that'll lead into the second point, which is, as a bootstrap startup, our acquisition cost. So choosing an e-commerce channel where basically the cost of acquisition is essential. What we noticed with North America was these costs were quite high, were quite significant. And so when we looked at Asia, we had very high population. So markets with a lot of population, strong internet adoption, the use of Facebook, Google, and other technologies similar to the West, but that the cost of acquisition and the CPC, if you will, was 5 to 15 times less. So your search terms in Asia could cost, a few cents. Whereas in North America, that very same search term could be $15. So for a startup like ours, we figured that we'd have a better opportunity to capture our first sales with customers. And then the third reason was proximity to manufacturing. So we manufacture our products in China, and we wanted to be as close to the consumer markets in which we operated. So this would allow us to have shorter lead times and so on. So Asia met all of those requirements, all of those kind of objectives, and the traction has been really phenomenal.
Yeah, those are really good reasons, right? The way you explain it. So I'll go back to what you mentioned. So yeah, cost per acquisition, right? So having played in that space for a long time, I remember the early days of, let's say, AdWords, right? CPCs were 4 or 5 cents. And now it's a very much a, how should I say, there's no more room for arbitrage when it comes to AdWords or Facebook, at least in North America. There are no more pockets of, hey, you can able to launch and able to obtain a really low cost of customer acquisition. And then it goes back to what you said in terms of growth rate. The market's growing really quickly. Going back to the manufacturing piece, that's the one that's most intriguing. How crucial was that piece for you? Because of your knowledge, your expertise in working directly with manufacturers, how important was that in your overall strategy?
It was massive. So just to kind of go back a little bit into my past, I used to manage a vendor portfolio for a retailer of more than like 50 factories and over 1,000 SKUs. So I was working in Asia, half the year, traveling there quite frequently, and had the opportunity to build great relationships with leading factories. And what became apparent was, to create a frictionless experience for customers to get product to their home quickly, to have an optimal level of inventory and small minimum quantities to order, I had to work with factories I know and trust and that were close to the markets we operate. So for example, if you were to purchase a product manufactured in Asia and ship it to Canada or the United States, it could take anywhere from 3 to 4 to even 5 months from production to reception here. Whereas in the markets in which we operate, so Singapore, Hong Kong, Australia, from the moment we began manufacturing a product to the warehouse or distribution center, the product could get there in as short as a month to 2 months. So the lead times are cut in pretty much in half. And that's a huge advantage. Also, a small advantage that we consider actually important to us, in our industry, in retail, when you purchase physical goods, typically manufacturers require very large minimum quantities, so in the hundreds of pieces. Given that I had really good relationships in the past, I was able to get very small quantities to start. So being, very small and having limited financial resources as a bootstrap business, that allowed us to test a lot of products really quickly in our markets. So for example, one of the things that was so hard for us at the beginning was deciding which product do we buy, and are we taking on too much risk buying inventory? And so being close to the manufacturer and having these small minimum quantities, we were able to test a few products, iterate, improve the products we had. So all of this was a good formula for us to do this.
That's really interesting. And why the idea of mattresses to start? And maybe the name of the company while you're at it.
So that's a good question. So the name Noa came from... it actually turns out that the ideation of the company came at the very same time that I had a son, and my son's name is Noah. But it also means in many languages, in Eastern languages, it means rest. It means repose.
Oh, I didn't know that.
It does, yeah. So it turned out really well. So obviously, starting a company, to all the entrepreneurs out there, of course, it's like having a baby in some respects. And so naming the company after my son, I think goes a long way to say how much I care about this as well. But the symbol also was quite good. One of the things that a lot of people suspect when they hear about our business is they think, we're in the same business as Casper and so many other mattress startups. And that couldn't be more far from the truth. So when we were in the process of thinking of starting a company, my partner and I looked at, a question which was, how do we get people to love their home and make it easy to do so? And the first product that we identified was actually a mattress. So the first product that most people need when they move into our home is somewhere to sleep. And so the mattress was a starting point, but there's so much more to that. And so the idea was, let's start with a mattress, but let's take on a radically different way of doing that. And this is where my experience previously in home furnishings came in. So when I first heard of Casper, for example, I couldn't understand why they chose to do a foam-only mattress. right? And being in the industry for over a decade, what I noticed from research data, from customer feedback and so on was that overwhelmingly customers prefer mattresses that are composed of pocket springs, among other things. And so I couldn't figure out why all of these sleep startups were doing mattresses with only foam. And it turns out it's really simple. One, making a foam-only mattress is really easy to manufacture. You pick a couple layers of foam, you glue them together. And the second is it's easy to package. So it fits those two kind of variables. But when you take into account that so many customers want pocket springs and other materials as part of the mattress, you have an issue where a lot of manufacturers just don't know how to compress that material, roll it, put it in a box without compromising the quality. And so myself and some trusted partners of mine, and especially our vendor, whom we work with today, figured it out. So we took about 6 to 8 months to find a way to engineer the manufacturing of these pocket springs and other premium layers of material in the mattress to compress it, roll it, put it in a box. So we feel that we're basically speaking to a very large audience. So every household needs a mattress, predominantly prefer mattresses that have these materials. So that was really the starting point. Why one product and why mattress? And now I'm really excited to say that we have some new products in the pipeline that we're launching by December.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah. Really
can you talk about what they are? Or
yeah, absolutely. So again, the idea was to start with one product that we felt was essential to beginning your home, right? And the second was beds. So we have an overwhelming amount of demand from our current customers and prospective buyers that are always asking us, do you guys sell beds? Do you have bed frames? So we've designed 2 exclusive designs ourselves. And they're currently in production right now. It's really exciting. And we already have, a timeline of future products to launch in 2018. So whereas, Casper and a lot of other brands are focusing on sleep, which I think is great, we're taking a different route. So we did start with mattress, but we're looking to other home furnishings as well.
That's great. And what's been the customer response so far, right? Like you're selling predominantly right now in 2 or 3 markets?
So we currently have 2 active markets, Singapore and Hong Kong, and we're opening Australia next week. Second week of October. The response has been amazing, surprising, exciting. So when we launched in Singapore, we did a pre-launch. And we sold out within a day. We weren't comfortable putting a huge amount of risk in an initial inventory, and we sold out almost immediately. And ever since then, we've been sold out every month in every market. So, we're working really hard because we want our customers to be happy and feel comfortable with their purchase online. But it has been a challenge for us to be in stock at all times. So from that point of view, the response has been great. So traction, demand, whichever you may call it, it's been really great. And in terms of the experience of the customers are asking for more products from our brand, and the reviews have been really positive. So they enjoy their mattress. I think we have 4 or 5 star reviews, on quite a lot of mattresses that have been shipped and received by our customers. So we're really happy. There's really something refreshing to hear when someone sends you a quick little note online and says, I'm finally sleeping good. And it really helps. So that's great. We're really humbled by that.
That's really cool. So I can imagine you've also had your fair share of challenges, right? So I guess first question, what's the biggest unexpected challenge, right? I imagine, you foresaw a lot of the issues like, hey, we have to grow customer demand. We have to fulfill, ship. What was the biggest unexpected challenge that you faced?
I think the biggest unexpected challenge we faced that is very unique to our company, our business model, and our product was the initial basically taking the leap of faith of placing a first order. So what I mean by that is, given our financial limitations in terms of being bootstrapped, and having to place an order for inventory up front, only having a singular product to which we would sell to all consumers in a market. I mean, it was a big bet. It was a bet that we debated often. We had to tweak and iterate on the product, figure out, is this what, the majority of consumers would want? So everything from testing, prototyping, sending samples to family and friends and asking for feedback. I think that was the hardest challenge. All the other challenges, whether it be logistics, advertising, the development of our e-commerce platform, I think these are all inherent to startups and all businesses really. But the surprising one was really taking that leap of faith, especially coming from a large organization in my previous experience where, resources was not an issue. You placed a lot of bets all the time. You had, big teams to help you out. This was a lot more personal. You're putting your own money on the line. You wanted to succeed. You care about your customer. You care about your business. So you're really thinking, okay, is this the right move? I think after that, after the initial launch and seeing that there was traction almost immediately, I think the challenge then became more just pure execution. How do we keep executing at this level to ensure that the customer keeps having a great experience? And to this day, I think that's our primary focus and our primary concern too is, being in 3 markets, having a small team. How do we keep maintaining that, very high level of customer experience, service, and so on?
How is the business culture different in Asia versus here, from both sides? Maybe on the supply side and also on the customer side. Are customer expectations different fundamentally, or is it approximately the same as you see here in North America?
Actually, that's a great question because there's something that was unexpected that happened to us in your previous question. I just thought of it. From a customer level, Hong Kong and Singapore are very similar to Western countries like Canada and the United States. So everyone uses Facebook, Google. Most companies have brand.com sites, so people shop there. Amazon actually just launched in Singapore. So it's very Western, so to speak. There are differences in language, specifically in Hong Kong, but Hong Kong residents and Singaporeans speak English. So we communicate with them and advertise in English. In Hong Kong, we also have our Chinese site. So I am, as you mentioned earlier, fluent in Chinese. So we want to make sure that our content is local or localized. But in terms of surprises, the one that was hard to predict and we never foresaw at the same level that has been important to us is how the regional climate actually is important. So both countries are in tropical climates. So Hong Kong and Singapore are closer to the equator. And these are things that, you could do your business plan and everything, but you just never foresee. And despite years of working there, I never thought that this would actually impact our company. But when you think of typhoons, rain, the heat and the humidity of these countries and how it will affect your product and logistics, so delivery. So when you have torrential rains, for example, you're going to have customer delivery issues. Or when it's very humid, you have to develop a product that takes that humidity, the climate into account to make sure that the materials are cool or don't have other kind of issues. So these are things that we didn't foresee to the extent that they are important to us, to our product, to our customers. So that was surprising. In terms of other cultural nuances, I think just doing business in general requires a certain level of open-mindedness, right? So we're very open-minded towards our consumers. We listen to feedback there. And then in terms of doing business in Asia, just in general, I had done it for a long time, and it's quite different. So I think it's about trying to understand the landscape there, whether it's payment processing, logistics, the expectation from a delivery standpoint. So for example, in Asia, a lot of customers shop on marketplaces like Lazada, which is in Southeast Asia, Alibaba companies. So Tmall or Tianmao, Jingdong. These are companies that are not only in China, but now outside of those borders. And delivery is exceptionally quick. So for example, delivery there could be within 4 hours or same day delivery. People are not accustomed to this, or it's something new here where you have Amazon Prime, for example. But in Asia, this is expected. So always being in stock, shipping within, the same day is quite surprising. And then a last note I would put out is technology and the use of technology. So for example, and you probably see a lot more of this, but in North America, what are mobile e-com kind of adoption rates? Are most people shopping on e-com, or what? Maybe 50%, 60%?
Yeah, depending on the industry, what I've seen some of our clients have 50+% of their sales on mobile in a retail environment, but I've seen higher as well. So yeah.
Okay, so like in our case, we have like 90% of our internet visitors are mobile.
Wow. Okay,
it's huge. So everything we do is focus on mobile first, and then typically the purchase will conclude on a laptop or a desktop. But it's incredible what the adoption of mobile is in Asia, in the markets in which we operate.
Yeah, one area I'd like to unpack with you, just because your knowledge of the market, I think it'd be useful to understand the context of your business, is understanding the scale of China in particular. We all hear about WeChat, for instance, where it's like kind of this overarching ecosystem that you could do anything in, right? What is the scale of e-commerce, let's say, in China, to give us a bit of sense of the market that you're operating in, and also why you bet on e-commerce only for now?
Okay, that's a great question. I think this deserves, hours of discussion. So I had the opportunity of doing consulting work in China, and that's when I really understood the scale of e-commerce, specifically in China, but this does kind of pour over into APAC, right? So all the countries in the Asia Pacific region. So basically, to give you a sense of scale, when you look at any of the marketplaces in China, so Tmall, Alibaba, Jingdong, there are hundreds of millions of people buying every single day. In China, there is Singles Day, which is basically the equivalent, I would say, to what we know as Boxing Day or, Black Friday. So essentially, I think last year in China on Singles Day, in an hour or something like that, there was like 11 or 10 or $11 billion of sales. It's outstanding. It's incredible. I know vendors that sell more in a single day online than they do in their whole year. Right? So they'll sell, like, for example, I know a manufacturer who does sofas, and he'll sell 10,000 sofas in a single day on Singles Day in China. It's crazy. So when you get to witness this scale, it's exciting and scary at the same time. So to kind of unpack it further and why that's important to us and how that speaks to our business is that when I saw those growth rates, when I saw the possibilities, right, of large population to adoption of e-commerce, mobile, and a willingness to buy online, it's hard not to consider Asia, China, and Southeast Asia as potential, really interesting markets for brands. Mm-hmm. And so what's also very different, by the way, in China and Asia is how pretty much everyone buys on marketplaces. Right? So in China specifically, very few companies and brands have a brand.com site. International brands do, right? So like a Sephora will, but local Chinese retailers will just go straight to Tmall and sell there, or Jingdong, JD.com, and sell there. And so marketplaces are where people shop. And that's very different from us, where we'll go to warbyparker.com or noasleep.com, or the like. So the approach to targeting customers, speaking to your customers, creating an experience is very different. And the strategy behind that is very different. to come back to scale, the challenge to with respect to scale in China is just the vast size of the country and the population. So just to put things into context, I know a lot of retailers that say, oh, we're now across Canada. There's 30 million people. In Beijing alone, there's like 25 million people in one city. There are, I think, 5 or 6 super cities in China, right? So in the city of Chongqing in China, you have north of 30 million people. That alone is unfathomable for a retailer to say, I want to expand across the country. Like one city, so to speak, is enough. And then what you have is the challenges from a marketing level. So culturally, in northern China, or say Beijing or Shanghai even, there are significant differences culturally with consumers, how they speak, their language, their slang, their preferences. And then, of course, if you go in southern China, Shenzhen and other areas, it's also very different. So from a marketing point of view, from a brand point of view, it's so hard to enter these markets as an international or as a foreigner. And a lot of foreign companies fail because they fail to see this, right?
Because they see China as one big country.
They see it as
the billion number doesn't scare them. It's like, hey, it's the same consumer. Whereas what you're saying is, it's a little bit like the US in the sense it's a collage of very different ethnicities and nationalities.
Absolutely. And also, I mean, we're not even talking about legal and all of those kinds of challenges, but when you see the scale of China and then you walk towards Southeast Asia, right? So Singapore, Indonesia, Thailand, Vietnam, Malaysia, the population there is, 200 plus million. And e-commerce as a percentage of retail sales is in its infancy. So there's so much room to grow. And that's what's really exciting.
What advice would you give to anyone that's looking to enter that market essentially?
Wow. I think of ourselves as a micronational, right? So we hear this term multinational and organizations, corporations around the world. And I think it was McKinsey or a top consulting firm that coined the term micronational. I was like, wow, that's a really cool term, right? So we're a startup. We established ourselves in Canada, but we operate in Asia. And so I think the advice I would give to anyone looking to open their product, their brand to that market, to that region of the world, first and foremost is being open-minded, right? So being open-minded to consumer preferences, regional differences, cultural, how they speak, the language, and so on, but also understanding life there. So having worked there, I kind of understood, the size of apartments, the cost of living, things like this. So I had a good instincts in terms of what the product should be. So I think brands and companies looking to go to Asia should think about that. One thing that's for sure, there's a huge premium placed on products manufactured in Canada or the United States that then are shipped to Asia. So Chinese, for example, absolutely love foreign brands, foreign manufactured products. So a company, off the top of my head, would be like, Canada Goose. It could be super fascinating, and how they could expand there. So I think that's really interesting.
No, that's very interesting, Jeremy. And yeah, I love the lesson where it's like you have to, I guess, understand the market. What do you, in terms of looking forward to the future, what technologies or what trends are you really keeping your eye on? Obviously, in relation to Noa Sleep.
So I think that there's 3 major trends in retail. So the retail industry worldwide, I think, is $25 trillion. It's bigger than telco. It's bigger than media. It's a huge industry, and there's room for everyone. But the first trend of 3 would be the Amazon effect. It's most felt in North America, but Amazon, I believe, in North America or in the US is capturing 50% of retail growth, whereas traditional retailers are growing at 1 or 2% per year, right? So Amazon is disrupting retail. And you could see something similar in Asia, right? So marketplaces like Alibaba expanding. acquiring companies like Lazada and so on and so forth. So marketplaces and how that will impact consumer behavior and shopping. So that's one big thing. The second, I think, is, long tail specialty retail. So Warby Parker, Casper, Noa Sleep. So, I think this is a key strategy for us, is focusing on what we're good at, very unique products, delivering a great customer experience, and being hyper-focused on that. And then the third trend is kind of bucketing technology, right? So everything from AI to personalization. And one thing I feel that doesn't get enough attention, or maybe it's just myself that just doesn't come across this, is voice. So, Amazon, Echo, Alexa, Google Home, and how will voice impact consumer search queries? I think that's something that deserves a lot of attention. So looking forward for Noa Sleep, I think it's really about three things. So we're pursuing growth on multiple areas. So one is product. So we're launching lots of new products. We want to expand our assortment so that it's, really interesting and dynamic for customers. The second is markets. So looking at new markets, whether it's a country or what have you. And then the third is distribution channels and technology, right? So adding our product to Amazon listings, for example, or finding ways to use technology to allow us to improve the experience, right? So online, whether it's personalizing products, better customer support, things like that. So I would say those are three kind of things that I would think about.
Yeah, it's interesting because it also ties to the three key trends that you said. So yeah, it could maybe take another hour just to talk about the three trends, but to go over them, I agree with the Amazon effect. And something that I think about a lot, is the notion of a winner take all dynamic, in a lot of markets, right? So absolutely. The fundamental distribution of the internet has been to remove the middleman, right? So to allow companies like Noa Sleep to be able to forge a direct to consumer relationship. So you're either a specialty where you have a point of view and you stand out with a specific brand, or you become the Walmart of the internet, which is basically Amazon, where it essentially satisfies all commodity-based purchases at a large scale, where I think traditional brick and mortar cannot compete anymore, because of that scale. And then, the last piece, going back to the voice search is one I think is very interesting as well, because it kind of ties in multiple technologies, including things like machine learning. How will consumer behavior change when, you simply ask your voice assistant, like, hey, how did I sleep last night? And how many hours of sleep did I get? And now we'll tell you, hey, you had actually a pretty good night's sleep. And being able to augment and add some intelligence around some daily behaviors that we never really track. So I find it very interesting how you're thinking about it.
There's something that's occurring right now, and that's the consolidation large consolidation of companies and brands, and the examples are numerous, right? So you look at Bonobos, which was acquired. You look at Jet.com. You look at ModCloth. IKEA recently purchased a business.
TaskRabbit, right?
Yeah, exactly. So you're seeing a lot of large companies, Amazon, Walmart, IKEA, purchase very small, specialized, hyper-focused companies to provide them with, a leg up, right, in speaking to consumers. And I think that's going to keep going. The trend will continue this way. The other thing, just to mention, is the media loves headlines like the retail apocalypse. And there are examples, Sears, Toys R Us, and so on. But I do believe personally that it is overblown and a little over exaggerated. People love shopping in stores. I think that brick and mortar serves a very important place. And I think it's a challenge for us. It's something we think about. We'd love to have a physical presence. Absolutely. And ultimately, all of this to say that our key priority is always the customer. So making sure the customer has a great product, great experience, and thinking of all of these things at the same time. Yeah.
That's pretty great, Jeremy. I want to be respectful of your time and maybe just ask one last question. Where can people learn more about Noa Sleep?
Absolutely. So you guys could check out Noa Sleep at our website, Noa, Noa, sleep.com. feel free to reach out to me on Twitter, LinkedIn, send me an email anytime. I'm really humbled to have been here today. I'm humbled by all the listeners, our customers. So I really appreciate this opportunity. And I hope this was interesting for everyone.
No, super useful. Honestly, that's why I love talking to you, Jeremy. I just learned so much about a place in the world that I have absolutely zero knowledge about. So it's a little bit selfish on my behalf. But yeah, thank you again.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to the Point of No Return podcast. Never miss an episode by clicking on the subscribe button on iTunes or Google Play.